So we've been reading American Miscellany, and we're all the way up to essay number 73. And I've got to say, at this point, of course, I've been reading American Miscellany with no preconceptions, just going through this book with absolutely no idea what lies ahead of me, just reading the words as they appear to me on the page, fresh, first-time reader just like you. So I don't know what the essays are going to be about, but it is essay number 73, and I've noticed a trend because this book was published in 1865. There's a lot of racism, These essays are supposed to be historic and scientific, and it seems like the historic essays tend to have a very racist view of non-Westerners. And they even throw shade at Europeans, too. I don't know. But, we're going to read this together for the first time. And hopefully it's not too horrific. Sometimes it kind of bothers me, the ideas and the words that I have to say. But here we go. All right, so we just finished essay number 72. That was about, about astronomy. Oh my goodness, a very boring lecture on astronomy. But hopefully this will be a little bit more interesting. Our subject matter is Sierra Leone. So we're here on page 172, but I'd love to start with this beautiful engraving here opposite. It's entitled Part of Regent's Town, a settlement of liberated Negroes in the colony of Sierra Leone. So hopefully you can get a nice view of that little village. And, and already we're slightly offensive, so here we go. This is a beautiful little book here. I don't know if you can get an idea here of how thick and glorious this book is. Kind of see the marbling there on the ends of the pages. And actually, now that the book is flipped, because I don't like to move this book too much, I'd just like to go ahead and show the second image here, the second engraving that we have on the subject of Sierra Leone. This one is entitled Regent's Town, Sierra Leone, from the Governor's House. So, lovely little view of the water, some ships from the Governor's House. Okay. Let's go ahead and you can see how thick it is. See how much more we have to go through. We still have all this to read, but look, we've made quite a bit of progress already. We're here on essay number 73, and on page 174 of our beautiful book. Here we go. All right. Oh, sorry. Page 172, that is. Page 172 for essay number 73, Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a considerable country of Western Africa on the Atlantic, distinguished for the colony formed there by the British nation, rather from motives of philanthropy than from those of commercial advantage. It is traversed by a considerable river, called the Mitomba, or Sierra Leone. Its name is derived from a ridge of mountains which rises near the southern bank of the river. This country equals, in fertility and populousness, any other in this part of Africa. It consists generally of one vast, almost impenetrable forest, only particular spots of which have been cleared and cultivated. Rice is raised wherever the ground is sufficiently watered for its production, and forms a constant food of the rich, but the poor content themselves with millet, yams, and plantains. There is a great abundance of the most delicate fruits. Elephant's teeth and civet are brought to the coast. The woods and mountains are infested with wild animals, particularly lions, from the multitude of which the country appears to have derived its name. There are swarms of insects, flies, mosquitoes, and particularly ants, the white species of which commit extraordinary devastation. There's the bells. Isn't that nice? The serpent species are also very numerous, and the rivers, besides yielding an ample supply of fish for food, contain large alligators and the manatee or sea cow. The natives of this country are not of so deep black a complexion as those of Cape Verde, nor have they the flat nose of the Negro race to such a degree, but the character of the different tribes varies very considerably. The Portuguese were the first who discovered and formed settlements on the river Sierra Leone. Toward the close of the 18th century, the British began to turn their views towards Sierra Leone with a view to colonization, for the more effectual abolition of the slave trade by raising up an African colony whither the slaves might be sent as freemen. Lord Mansfield having decided in 1772 that a slave who sets foot in Britain becomes free. A number of blacks in this country left their masters and were wandering about in a desolate condition. Granville Sharp formed the plan of transporting them to Africa, and the aid of the government having been obtained, they were landed in 1787 upon a district purchased from the King of Sierra Leone. These Negroes and the white females sent with them were, these Negroes and the white females sent with them were mostly of indifferent characters, and severe mortality ensued among them. In 1792, about 1,200 Negroes who had left their masters in the United States during the Revolutionary War were also landed at Sierra Leone, and several years later a colony was increased by 550 Maroons from Nova Scotia. Little progress, however, had been made in the objects for which the colony was formed, and in 1807 it was surrendered into the hands of the Crown. At the period, Great Britain received permission from several powers to treat as pirates such of their subjects as should be found engaged in the slave trade north of the line, and the liberated Negroes seized by her cruisers were placed at Sierra Leone. For the first 6 months, they receive a daily allowance from the government, after which lands are assigned them, and they are left to support themselves. The number thus liberated has been about 20,000, and although their wild and improvident habits have thrown many difficulties in the way of the benevolent exertions of British authorities, recent accounts give decided proofs of great improvements in the spirit and condition of the colonists. Freetown, the principal place of the colony, has an excellent harbor on the river Sierra Leone, about 6 miles from the sea and upward of 6,000 inhabitants. Regentstown, 6 miles south of Freetown, founded in 1816, has a population of 1,300. That's 1,300. Has a population of 1,300, and in the vicinity are several villages with more distant stations of Waterloo, Wellington, and Hastings. Bathurst on the Gambin is a settlement also connected with this colony. Our cut represents part of Regentstown in the colony of Sierra Leone. It is inhabited by Negroes of many different nations in Africa, whom piratical dealers were carrying into slavery. The ships in which they had been crowded together were taken by the English cruisers, and the Negroes set at liberty here, and in other towns in the colony, and the Negroes set at liberty. Here and in other towns in the colony, these injured Negroes are placed in safety. On the right of the view, a part of the town is seen. It extends, however, a considerable way further than is shown in our engraving. It is laid out with regularity, possesses several streets, and is inhabited by nearly 2,000 Negroes, old and young. A stone bridge built by the Negroes leads from the town to the side of the brook where the principal buildings are. They consist chiefly of the church, the mission or parsonage house, and a house for the governor. Those and other buildings are all of stone. This place is now a beautifully cultivated and well-governed spot, and yet, only a few years since, the whole was a wild desert. Another view of the town is presented on the opposite page. The climate of Sierra Leone forms so peculiar a feature of its geographical character that we gladly avail ourselves of Major Ricketts' account, prefixed in his journal of the Ashanti War. On landing at Freetown, a stranger is not a little surprised to behold a place so far superior to what he had been induced to expect, and if he should arrive in a Hermitan season, when resident Europeans are generally in better health than at other periods of the year from its salubrious effects, he will be saluted with an agreeable smell similar to that of new hay, and will wonder how it is possible the place could be so unhealthy as represented. But on the approach of the rainy season, his wonder begins to cease. The Hermitan is a very dry easterly wind, which in a few days dries up all the vegetation except trees. It sets in about December and continues at intervals for several days together. Such is the nature of the Hermitan, that the flooring of the houses, window shutters, and other woodwork shrink and separate more than an inch asunder. The glass is broken and the furniture is warped, but at the approach of the rains, the open seams gradually close again. After the absence of rain for many months, the parched surface of the earth, all its vegetation, except trees, having been dried up by the Hermitan, and then scorched by the intense heat of a tropical sun, is suddenly covered with verdure. The day after the first shower, the form of vegetation is so great that the face of nature is completely changed, and it may literally be said that the grass and weeds may be seen to grow. Yet, however strange it may appear, although these, as well as the indigo plant, grow spontaneously everywhere, new land will not satisfactorily produce the usual articles of consumption for 3 successive years, and some land will not even yield the second year. The dry season is preceded by dry tornadoes, which, towards the latter end of May, are accompanied by rain. They last generally about an hour, sometimes not so long. They very much resemble the hurricanes in the West Indies, but are not so furious. They vary from southeast to northeast. A dark cloud in the eastern horizon foretells the approach of a tornado. It advances, accompanied by tremendous thunder and vivid flashes of lightning, which at first are distant and faint, until the heavens gradually become obscured by one black cloud. It frequently happens that from the quarter opposite to that where the cloud first appears, there previously arises a breeze, which dies away as the tornado gathers. The atmosphere then becomes very sultry, and the tornado advances with a great rush of wind, bursts, sweeping before it, if no rain has previously fallen, immense clouds of dust. The wet tornadoes are succeeded by a beautiful serene sky, and the air is greatly refreshed. The frame becomes invigorated, and the mind more cheerful. As the rainy season advances, the tornadoes gradually cease and are succeeded by almost constant heavy rain. At the termination of the rains, the tornadoes again make their appearance, becoming weaker as the dry season approaches, until they cease altogether. At intervals during the day in the rainy season, the action of an intensely hot sun on the earth, covered with a luxuriant vegetation and saturated with moisture, produces a disagreeable sickening smell, which is probably one of the causes of the fever that prevails at this period of the year, as persons recently arrived are generally taken ill in July or August. Some, however, had been known to reside in the colony about 2 years without having been affected by it. If they remain beyond this time, they are certain not to escape it much longer. When at length they take the fever, it generally proves fatal to them. It is considered the more favorable symptom for a stranger to be seized with the fever soon after his arrival. The havoc which this dreadful disease has made among the Europeans who have gone out or have been sent to the colony is well known. On the first arrival of European troops in 1825, they died in greater numbers than at any subsequent period. The cause was attributed much to the incomplete state of the barracks, which had been hastily erected, the materials arriving from England at the same time with the troops. The barracks could not consequently be covered in before the rains. From the want of accommodations on shore, most of the troops were kept on board the transports for some months. After the completion of the barracks and the walls become dry, the troops enjoyed better health, but they drank freely, and it was very difficult to keep them sober. This, no doubt, tended much to bring on sickness among them. The officers died, however, in proportion.